I'm going to take you on a journey through a time portal into a parallel universe, to a world that I think is the most important, yet probably the most overlooked part of our natural world. And on the way, I'm going to talk about innovation, about making a blockbuster TV series, one that I think is probably the most challenging I've made in my career, but also I think one of the most rewarding. And I hope I'm going to show you things that you have never seen before in your life. A big part of my job is to think about what's next in the world of natural history filmmaking. What are the next natural wonders that we can show you? Sort of guess what the zeitgeist is. And a few years ago, I sensed that the time was right for plants. Now that is sort of suicide for a wildlife filmmaker, you might think, but I was determined, and I thought it was high time we turned our cameras on their world. And I felt there was a sense of urgency as well, because their world is changing really, really fast. And there are many, many threats to that plant world, that plant community, that although the scientific community understands it and realizes it, the rest of us, it's perhaps not so obvious. And also, I like a filmmaking challenge. And part of the problem is that we tend not to give plants much attention. We think they're quite pretty, quite beautiful, but we don't see their importance, and we don't see how amazing they are. And that's true even for these extraordinary giants, as impressive as they are, the sequoias, giant sequoias in Northern California. And in fact, I think it's partly that scale and permanence that's part of the problem. It's partly because they seem to just sit there and do nothing. Yet these trees are the fastest growing organisms on the planet. And the problem is known as plant blindness. And that blindness is a real shame, because in reality, plants live amazing, dramatic lives. It's just they live, as I said, in this parallel universe on a different time scale and in a way that's beyond our senses. And I wanted to change that, to open our eyes. And I wondered if it was possible to do that by making a TV series about plants for a mainstream primetime audience, one that tens of millions of people would watch and overcome that plant blindness, be entertained, of course, but also understand and connect with this strange, magical world and realize how much we depend on plants. So that was the Green Planet mission, if you like. But to succeed, we would have to become time travelers. And we'd have to use both some innovative storytelling and use some very cool photography, which I'll talk to you more about later. But first things first. In any natural history film, you have to work out who's going to be your stars. You have to start thinking about casting, just like you do in the movies. Now, in a Planet Earth type series, which is about animals, that would be lions or tigers or elephants or polar bears. But what's going to be the box office attractions in the plant world? Well, you want bizarre big hitters like this. This is the mind-boggling Rafflesia. It is, in fact, the world's biggest plant. It's about 3 feet across. It has no stem and it has no leaves. But its petals are the color of blood. They appear to have teeth. They appear to have whiskers. And it exudes the smell of death. It's also called the corpse flower. And it's all done to seduce carrion flies to do its bidding. Rafflesia is all about merciless exploitation. You also want to have tragedies and triumphs, hunters and hunted, plants that hunt and devour animals alive. This is the carnivorous sundew. Maybe you want a femme fatale, cruel deception, all in the name of seduction. This is the hammer orchid, and its flower looks and smells just like a female wasp, certainly to a male wasp. So, we soon had countless good-looking stars that we could draw on, but could we get the audience to care about their lives? There was one critical thing very much connected to seeing plants from a different perspective that gave me a sense that we could. I had seen that the science was changing. There were all sorts of extraordinary new discoveries and new approaches that the scientific community were making. Scientists were beginning to talk more and more about plant behavior. Now, the idea that plants behave was the key. If we could look at them and portray them in the same way as we do look at animal behavior and feel that same kind of intensity when you see what's going on in an animal's life, in a nutshell, try and make a planet Earth for plants, then we could be in business. And when I started working in the natural history world, I got excited by two things. One was the power of the lens, the ability of the lens to show you things that your eye could never see. But also I realized that there was an extraordinary importance and sort of particularity about the individual organisms, about how you frame, if you can frame those stories about individuals and from an individual's perspective, it changes everything. Because when you watch an individual struggle, you learn so much about their survival strategies, but more surprisingly, it suddenly becomes very relatable to your own life. But to effectively do that, you can't just tell the story, you have to be able to see it. You need a strong visual way of conveying what that individual's perspective is, of showing what's at stake in its life. But could you do that for plants? Well, as I say, I was determined to do so. This is a story that begins on the forest floor of the Costa Rican rainforest. A massive old tree has fallen and it has left a light gap on the forest floor. Light floods onto that floor for the first time in maybe decades. Lying there are hundreds and hundreds of seeds, all of different sorts of plants, and they've all been waiting just for this one moment. This is their chance to burst into action and race to the light. Each one of them, of course, is a unique individual life, and each wants to outdo the other, but only one can win. And this becomes an extraordinary scene of conflict, individual strategy and counter-strategy, but only when you travel from our time frame into the plants world through a whole new approach to time-lapse photography. First on stage, you'll see, is a vine. It's doing its best to hitch a ride, but will it be a winner?
This vine is groping blindly around with its tendrils. It attempts to reach the light by hitching a ride. Its tendrils are highly sensitive to touch. And a suitable target is in range. Got it. The vine tightens its grip and begins to haul itself upwards. But it's now overtaken by the forest's fastest growing tree, a young balsa. Its giant leaves are already 40 centimeters across and are stealing the light from its rivals below. But the balsa's battle is not yet won. Other, different vines are lying in wait. Each is armed with dozens of claw-like hooks. If just one hook gets a grip, the vine will be able to smother its victim. But the balsa is defended by a shield of slippery hairs. The vine's hooks just can't get a hold. The balsa balsa brushes them aside and continues to rush skywards. Leaving the losers in its shadow to fight among themselves. This balsa has won its battle for the light.
That filming approach has never been really done before, and that's only possible because we've developed some new technology based around robots. These are not robots that can mend hearts, but they can do other extraordinary things. We had to design and build a moving multiple-axis robot-controlled time-lapse camera that could travel in plant space and plant time and see into the world in a totally different way. We called it the Trifid. And it allows us to use the sort of cinematic camera moves that we would do with animals, moving in and around the plants in our time frame. But what goes on in the frame of the camera, what the camera is seeing is happening in plant time, in time-lapse. Now we had to make this camera super tough because it needed to go all around the world, even underwater. But it was an absolute breakthrough in how we could film plants. Once we had our secret weapon, the Trifid, we and the Trifid went globe-trotting to film parts of the world and to film plants in action across the four corners of the world. We did it over 5 episodes featuring a different type of world. One is the desert world, like here. You can see in the Talamacan Desert in northern China, or the saguaro cactus in Mexico. Not everything is high-tech in our world. To water worlds, like here in the Crystal River in Brazil, to seasonal worlds. We traveled even to the edge of the Arctic Circle. And finally, as I'll talk a little bit later, into human worlds. But this is a TV series, and to work, Green Planet need to promise action and drama, and on an epic scale, like you see with animals, like filming the yearly battle in the Pantanal involving a giant, the giant Amazonian water lily. It's the ruler of the Pantanal, the largest wetland in the world. Now, to tell this story, we had the challenge of portraying in time-lapse, of course, multiple protagonists with multiple concurrent conflicts, multiple concurrent strategies, all playing out on a kind of Shakespearean stage, and of course, filmed from multiple different perspectives, including underwater. The only solution to that was to film both here on location in the Pantanal, but also to create a mini Pantanal in perfect ecological detail in an old barn in Devon, England. And with it, a bigger and even more complex technical innovation. To film this drama, we had to design a new rig, which we called Otto. Now, Otto can go places that no camera, even the Trifid, has been before, and it can do it in dozens of different places at effectively exactly the same time. It's what we call the sort of Rocky Raging Bull approach. I don't know if you remember that film where you see from lots of different perspectives the fist hits him, and then you see the ring, and then you see his punching. All these multiple images and multiple perspectives all intercut, so you get this sense of the drama that's going on. You have to kind of think in 4 dimensions, but also in the future, because you have to plot each different camera position at any point over this 3-week-long conflict, and do it for each individual character you want to feature, and you have to predict it all in advance. And of course, once that battle starts, there's no stopping it, so you have to keep your fingers crossed the plants and the cameras do the right thing. So here's a little section from near the start of this story we filmed. Many, many water plants have colonized a newly flooded backwater in the Pantanal. This is their chance when the floods come in. And all are thriving, but now something extraordinary starts to emerge from the muddy bottom of the swamp.
It's a monster. It's well armed. It clears space for itself by wielding one of its buds like a club. And now it dominates the surface. This is a leaf of the giant water lily. It expands by over 20 centimeters a day and eventually measures more than 2 meters across.
That's 6 feet, by the way. So once it's established, then the water lily starts to send up multiple leaves covered with these vicious spines, and then it totally begins to take out the competition.
Competitors are pushed aside. Some are crushed or skewered. Eventually, its immense leaves press their margins against one another, totally cutting off the light from the plants beneath them. The battle is over, and victory is total.
But no plant is an island, not even a giant water lily. And the green planet is much more than just plants fighting plants. It's about the whole plant world, about the whole ecology, the interconnectedness of life, and the relationship and importance of plants to animals, including us. And if we do that right, one of the important roles I think a series like this can play is helping storytelling to help communicate the importance of ideas like interconnectedness and ecology and biodiversity to a big audience. And especially that plants are the foundation of that biodiversity. Now, to help tell those stories, we needed another ingredient. We needed to get Sir David Attenborough, the world's great storyteller, our presenter, guide, investigator, and time traveler. You've been hearing his voice so far. 93 years old when he was working on this series, so quite an impressive achievement. And throughout the series, Sir David takes us from our world into the plant world. But he can also help us understand and experience firsthand the complexity and the fragility of this world. So a story that showcases this stars 2 beautiful characters, and 3 if you include David. And by the way, this sequence begins in plant time, in time-lapse, and then slips into human time as David begins to speak. Look out for how on cue the bat is when it arrives.
This is the 7-hour flower. This plant produces its flowers at night. They open about 6 o'clock, and each blossom only lasts that night. It opens for about 7 hours and then it dies. But during that time it provides food for one particular animal, a bat. And here it is. During the 7-hour flowers flowering season, Underwood's bat feeds almost exclusively on its nectar. It is the plant's primary pollinator. It might seem that this is a fairly evenly balanced relationship, but not so. The bat likes this nectar because it's sweet, but it's not very nourishing. So the bat must visit hundreds of flowers a night, and it pollinates them as it feeds. But if a patch of forest becomes too small, with too few flowers, the bats will disappear. And without the bats, the flowers can't reproduce and will soon die out. The partnership is broken.
That interdependence highlights the fragility of plant ecosystems when they're broken, and how easy it is to happen unnoticed. If you walked around inside that forest, it looks fine, but it's too small to survive, and it's on an ecological downward spiral. And that is a microcosm of countless other bigger challenges facing the plant world. Now, of course, Green Planet is a TV show that needs to be mainstream, it needs to be entertainment, and rightly so. But alongside that, can our unique, I think, immersive, connecting approach do more by helping people see plants differently, and differently enough to care enough about them, both individually and collectively, and therefore to do something about the fragility of the green planet. We now know that as a significant percentage of the audience who watched our programs, at the end of it, said they not only understood the natural world much more, but they felt connected to plants and the natural world in general, and they were much more likely to do something about it. A scientific paper that's just been published reflected this and analysed this and referred to it as the green planet effect. I think that green planet effect speaks to our ancient, deep relationship with nature and plants. And it reminds us how precious it is and how, given a chance, the green planet has the power to heal itself and maybe us too. I was going to finish there, but I just wanted, because of the other talks, there was just one more thing I just wanted to quickly say. Plants are our oldest and truest allies. They cool us, they provide water for us, they purify the water, the air we breathe, they sequester CO2, and ultimately everything we eat comes from plants. As Carl Sagan said in one of the talks earlier you saw, he described the Earth as a little blue dot. And over 30 years of making wildlife films, mostly about animals, I would agree that this is a blue planet. But after having made this series, I'd like to make a case for thinking about it as the green planet. But the issue still remains the same. It is our home, and it needs to be loved. Thank you very much.